Frank Reynolds halted his worn pickup at the curb before the county courthouse, his roughened hands clutching the wheel, a heartbeat beyond need. At 49, the crease's near-high size wove tales of toil and steadfast endurance. The Texas sun had tanned his skin through years of ranching, and though his dark locks now bore streaks off gray at the sides, his posture remained firm, his determination steady. Next to him, his 10-year-old son Baba tugged at his Sunday shirt collar. "Thou gotta stay here long, Pa. I wanted to see Rusty's new pups this afternoon." Frank offered a soft smile to his boy. Since losing his mother to illness 3 years prior, Bobby had poured his heart into tending every creature on their humble cattle ranch. The border collie's fresh litter had become his newest joy. "Won't be too long," Frank assured, though he wasn't wholly certain what lay ahead inside. His friend, Sheriff Dan Hollister, had phoned him yesterday with an odd request, one that had kept Frank restless most of the night, mulling over what might come. The courthouse stood silent for Saturday morning, their steps resounding on the gleaming floor as they headed to courtroom B. As directed, inside, Sheriff Hollister was speaking with Judge Wilson and a grim-faced woman Frank didn't know. By the window, her back to the entrance, stood a slim figure. A young woman with golden blondie hair cascading in waves beyond her shoulders. "Frank, good you could come," Dan said, striding over to clasp his hand, and Bobby, growing taller every time I see you. Bobby flashed a brief grin, momentarily forgetting his unease in the formal setting. "This is Mrs. Gladys Palmer," Dan went on, nodding to the Thestern woman and her stepdaughter, Rebecca. At her name, the young woman by the window turned. Frank was struck first by her youth. She could hardly be more than 18, and then by the quiet poise in her stance, despite the fear glimmering in her bright blue eyes. "Mr. Reynolds," Judge Wilson said, "I value your presence here today. We face an unusual matter that calls for a man of your integrity." Frank nodded courteously to the judge but kept his gaze on the girl, who seemed to be assessing him with equal focus, gauging his character. Mrs. Palmer cleared her throat with impatience. "As I've told the court, since my husband's death last winter, supporting Rebecca has become an unbearable load. I'm moving Tommy's sister's home in Dallas, and there's simply no space." The cold way she spoke of her stepdaughter, as if disconcerted, made Frank's jaw clench. "Rebecca turns 18 in 2 months," Mrs. Palmer went on, "but as an unwed woman with no kin and no future, her choices are few. I've arranged for her to serve as a housekeeper for a wealthy family in exchange for suitable payment." Rebecca's eyes fell to the floor, her cheeks burning with shame. "That wealthy family you chose was the Wilcox household," Sheriff Hollister cut in, his tone sharp. "Thaddeus Wilcox has buried 2 young wives already, and Hisham is no place for a girl like Rebecca. She's of age to sign contracts," Mrs. Palmer snapped, "and those with nothing can't afford to be picky." Judge Wilson raised a hand to quit them both, "which is why I've asked Mr. Reynolds to consider another option." He turned to Frank. "You've been running your ranch and raising your son alone for 3 years now. Rebecca needs a secure place until she can stand on her own. We thought you might offer her work as your housekeeper, with proper lodging and fair pay." Frank felt Bobby's curious gaze on him. Truthfully, they'd been managing, but barely. The house hadn't felt a woman's care in years. Meals were a basic, and Frank often collapsed, worn out from juggling ranch tasks and home duties. But that wasn't what made him agree. It was the quiet courage in Rebecca's eyes when she finally met his gaze directly, not begging, but firm despite her uncertain fate. "My late wife, Martha, turned the old foreman's cabin into August house," Frank said thoughtfully. "It's modest but private, with its own door. It would be fitting for Rebecca to have her own space." He turned to the young woman. "Miss Rebecca, I can provide room, board, and $20 a month for cooking, cleaning, and helping with household tasks. Sundays are yours, and you're free to leave with 2 weeks' notice." Before Rebecca could answer, Mrs. Palmer stepped forward. The deal with the Wilcox family included a placement fee of $300, payable to me as Rebecca's guardian. Frank saw Judge Wilson's face darken, but he reached for his checkbook anyway. He could scarcely afford such a sum, but some things outweighed money. "I believe that settles our business." Mrs. Palmer, the judge said Ice-Alliance, the check was signed. Your train to Dallas departs in an hour. I suggest you catch it. The woman left without a glance back at the stepdaughter she'd raised for over a decade. The silence after her exit felt like a breath finally let go. Rebecca spoke first, her voice gentle but firm. Mr. Reynolds, you don't know him. You owe me nothing. Why would you know this? Frank chose his words carefully. My father always said life's not about what you gain, but what you give. I can offer you safety and dignity while you chart your course ahead. That's all. The ride back to Whispering Pines Ranch was quiet at first. Bobby gave up the front seat to Rebecca, whose small suitcase, holding all her worldly possessions, now rested in the truck bed. Do you like dogs, Miss Rebecca? Bobby finalized, breaking the stillness. Rebecca turned to the boy, her smile shy but warm. I do, very much. Our Rusty just had pups. 6 off them. Pa says we can only keep one, though. That sounds like a smart choice, Rebecca replied, easing slightly. Maybe you could show them Tome when we get there. Frank caught her eye briefly and nodded his gratitude for her kindness to his son. Something in her gentle reply to Bobby soothed a concern he hadn't known he held. The ranch came into sight as they topped the final hill, a sprawling, yet modest spread, with a 2-story farmhouse, several barns, and cattle grazing far off. The foreman's cabin stood about 50 yards from the main house, freshly painted a bright white with blue trim. It's lovely, Rebecca whispered, taking in the rolling hills. It's home, Frank said simply. The first few days set a pattern. Rebecca proved a skilled cook, turning basic ingredients into meals that reminded Frank of his mother's Sunday feasts. The house, neglected but never filthy, began to glow under her care. Bobby took to trailing her when his chores were done, talking about school and ranch life with a warmth Frank hadn't seen since Martha's passing. Rebecca moved cautiously, as if testing the limits of her new place, eager to help, hesitant to intrude, and always courteous. It wasn't until her 3rd week at Whispering Pines that Frank heard her laugh, truly laugh. As she and Bobby played with the pups in the side yard, the sound stopped him short, making him pause in his work to watch them through the barn door. She's nice, Pa, Bobby said that night as Frank tucked him in. Do you think she'll stay? Frank smoothed his son's hair. That's her choice, son. This is just work for Miss Rebecca until she decides what she truly wants. I think she likes it here, though, Bobby murmured sleepily. As spring turned into summer, the unease between Frank and Rebecca slowly melted into easy companionship. She joined them for Sunday drives to church, began proposing improvement of the house that Frank gladly approved, and sometimes sat with them the porch in the evenings, sharing tales of her childhood before her father's summary. Frank learned she had a sharp mind and a passion for books. When he found her reading by lamplight after a long day's work, he made a trip to town and returned with a small bookshelf and several volumes from the bookstore. These were Martha's favorites. He said gruffly, they've just been collecting dust. Rebecca ran her fingers gently over the embossed covers. Thank you. I'll care for them well. Books are meant to be read, Frank replied. Martha would have loved knowing they're being cherished again. On the evening of Rebecca's 18th birthday, a milestone Frank had quietly marked on the calendar, she found a small package wrapped in brown paper at her place at the dinner table. We know it's your birthday, Bobby announced before she could ask. Pa and I picked it out special. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny house. It's not much, Frank said, suddenly shy, but we wanted you to know you have a home here as long as you want it. Rebecca's eyes brimmed with tears. No one's remembered my birthday since my father died. Later, after Bobby had gone to bed, Frank found Rebecca on the porch steps, gazing at the stars strewn across the Texas sky. May I sit with you? He asked. She nodded, making space beside her on the step. I want to thank you, Frank said after a quiet minute, not just for the work you do, but for bringing joy back to this house. Bobby smiles more than he has in years. Rebecca turned to him, her expression sincere in the moonlight. You saved him, Mr. Reynolds, Frank, he corrected softly. And I didn't save you. I just offered a door. You stepped through it with your own strength, Frank. She repeated, trying the name. I've been thinking about my future. There's a teaching college in Austin that offers scholarships. 2 young women who qualify. I've always dreamed of teaching. Frank felt a mix of pride and something like loss. You should apply. You'd be wonderful with children. It would mean leaving in the fall, she said quietly. If I'm accepted, this will always be a place you can come back to, Frank promised. Whatever you choose. Summer passed in a blur of golden days and warm evenings. Rebecca got her acceptance letter in August, along with news of a partial scholarship. Frank insisted on covering the rest. Consider it an investment, he said when she objected. Besides, Bobby would never forgive me if I didn't help you reach your dream. The night before Rebecca was to leave for Austin, they sat together on the porch after Bobby had grudgingly gone to bed. The air between them felt heavy with unspoken words. 2 years isn't so long, Rebecca finally said. And Austin isn't. So far, Frank nodded, his throat tight with feelings his heart wasn't ready to name. At 49, he had no right to feel this way about a young woman of 18, no matter how wise she seemed. Write to Bobby, he said. He'll miss you fiercely. Rebecca turned to face him fully. And you, will you miss me too, Frank Reynolds? Every day, he admitted, the plain truth of it catching them both off guard. She reached out, taking his weathered hand in her smooth one. Then this isn't goodbye, it's just until next time. 2 years passed in a rush of letters, occasional holiday visits, and changes both subtle and deep. Bobby grew 3 inches and found a passion for horses that rivaled his love of dogs. Frank grew the ranch, adding a small horse breeding program that showed promise. And Rebecca flourished at college, her natural wit and drive earning her the respect of professors and peers alike. It was on a warm June afternoon when Frank spotted a familiar figure walking up the drive. Suitcase in hand, Rebecca's hair was shorter, now styled like young professional women, but her smile was just as he remembered. Bob reached her first, nearly knocking her over in his excitement. Frank followed more slowly, suddenly unsure of his will come after the months apart. You didn't write that you were coming, Hesade when Bobby finally let her go. Rebecca's eyes met his, steady and sure. I wanted to tell you in person. I've been offered a teaching job at the Riverdale School, just 12 miles from here. Hope sparked in Frank's chest. That's wonderful news. I thought, perhaps, she continued, her voice growing bolder. I might ask about room and board somewhere nearby, with a family I trust. Frank stepped closer. I believe we might have a place for you, if you're interested. That evening, after Bobby had finally been coaxed to bed, Frank and Rebecca sat once more on the porch steps beneath a sky full of stars. When I first came here, Rebecca said softly, I was scared to want anything beyond getting by. You gave me the freedom to dream again. Frank listened, barely breathing. 2 years is a long time to think. She went on, to measure of what you want. She turned to face him. I'm not that scared girl anymore, Frank. I'm a woman who knows her own mind and heart. Rebecca, Frank began, but she gently pressed a finger to his lips. Age is just a number, she said firmly. What matters is the life you build together, the respect we have for each other, the love we share. She smiled, the moonlight glinting in her eyes. That is, if you want the same things I do. Frank took her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. I've loved you since that first evening when I heard you laugh with Bobby in the yard, he confessed. But I never thought he could love you too. Rebecca finished for him. Sometimes the most beautiful things in life are the ones we never expected. They were wed the following spring in a simple ceremony in Thegerton Martha had planted years ago. Bobby stood proudly as his father's best man. Judge Wilson officiated, a pleased smile on his lips as he pronounced them husband and wife. Life at Whispering Pines Ranch continued townfold in seasons of work and rest, struggle and joy. Rebecca taught at the local school while helping Frank manage the growing ranch. Bobby graduated high school and went on to agricultural college, returning with fresh ideas and, in time, a wife of his own. And on quiet evenings, long after the events that brought them together had faded into family lore, Frank and Rebecca still sat on the porch steps, his arm around her shoulders, her head against his chest, counting their blessings beneath the vast Texas ski. Did you ever think it would turn out this way? Rebecca would sometimes ask. That a day at the courthouse, When you offered a stranger a place to stay, and Frank would always answer the same way, with the simple truth that had shape there. Life together, I didn't know what would happen. I just knew it was the right thing to do. The rest was up to Grace.